All right, Andrea, thank you, Laurie.
All right, well, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I do want to thank my cousin Molly and Lori my cousin Molly for suggesting this, Lori for reaching out, putting this fun class together. This is a delicious apple cake. It's apple season, of course. We're gonna use a little honey and the caramel glaze to tie it all together. And there were a few questions about how long the cake is gonna last if you make it today. If you wanted to, you could freeze it and then keep it in the freezer till next week, defrost it, make the glaze, and then glaze your cake. And one more thank you, of course, is to our fantastic tech team helping me out with the Zoom class, which I admit I'm much more accustomed to teaching in person than over Zoom. So I appreciate all the tech support and all the question fielding. So again, I'm gonna walk you folks through the recipe today and show you my techniques for peeling, slicing, and dicing the apples, mixing the ingredients together. And I am going to pause at intervals for questions just in case I go too quickly for you, okay? I have all my ingredients laid out on a sheet pan just to make it easier. I have things pre-measured, so I have my flour, my ground ginger, the cinnamon, baking soda, salt, nutmeg. I'm going to use fresh nutmeg on a microplane rasp, and I'm going to grate that when it's time. And I also have all the ingredients for the glaze laid out as well. So that just helps me when I'm baking in case I get distracted by the phone or the kids coming in, and then I'm like, oh, did I add the baking soda? Did I not add the baking soda? So if everything's measured out and you forget whether or not you've added the ingredient, if your prep bowl is empty, you know that you've added it already, okay? So we are going to start with peeling and dicing the apples. But if your oven takes a while to preheat and you wanted to turn it on right now, you could. I'm going to turn mine on in a little bit because I'm using a small oven. It doesn't take too long to preheat. Baking in a bundt pan today. This is my mom's bundt pan. It's well loved. We're going to butter this thoroughly. Make sure you get in all of the little ridges and spots to make sure the cake doesn't stick. I'm going to do that in just a moment though. I'm going to peel and dice my apples first. Now's a good time for questions while I'm peeling and dicing. I'm going to show you how I like to peel my apples though. I like to start with taking the skin off the top and the bottom, and then in one smooth stroke, go from top to bottom to get all the peel off. And the apples I'm using today, I have 2 Fuji apples and 1 Granny Smith apple, just for a combination of textures and flavors. But any apple that holds up well in the oven is fine. And I'm going to peel all 3 of my apples. They're rather large today. I'm going to peel all 3 of my apples first, and then I'm going to show you how I like to dice them.
Jeff, what do you think of Pink Lady apples?
I love Pink Lady apples. They hold up well in baking, plus they have a nice flavor, not too tart. Yeah. All right. So I'm putting all the apple peels, just so I know it's off camera, you can't see it, but I'm putting them all into a compost bowl. I have a bunny and a dog, both who love apple cores. So all of these they're not being thrown away. They're gonna go out to the apples or the rabbit and the dog after class. But they can go in your compost if you like. And honestly, if you don't mind the texture of the apple peel, you don't have to peel your apples either. You can leave them on for fiber and texture. Okay, so I have my 3 apples peeled. Now apples being one of those round things, and I'm very fond of keeping my fingers intact, I like to make sure that the round things that I'm cutting are flat. So if they're a little wobbly on my cutting board, I actually cut the tops and bottoms off a little bit further to make sure that I have a nice flat surface to cut on. And then what I'm gonna do is, you can see, and you can kind of envision where the seeds are inside that core. So I'm gonna take my knife and I'm actually gonna cut on either side of that core, and then again, so I'll end up with 2 large flat halves and 2 slightly smaller ones. So now I have taken a round thing, made it so now I have flat sides so that it doesn't roll while I'm cutting. Try to adjust this a little bit so you can see my cutting board. I'm not sure I can make that happen, but let me know if you have any questions. So now I'm just going to take these pieces and break them down a little bit more so I have a nice size cube. So I cut this into a bâtonnet if we were in culinary school. So I have my little bâtonnet or my little carrot stick size. And then I'm going to cut those further so I have a nice little cube. Okay, so I end up with cubed apples. I still have my fingers intact. And then I'm just going to make a little pile, set them aside until it's time to mix those in to the batter. They're going to go in at the end, toward the end, with the candied ginger. So also, while you guys are finishing up the apples and I'm finishing up the apples, I'm going to turn my burner on behind me and start melting my butter. If you have a microwave, you can melt the butter in there, but I don't have a microwave.
What kind of knife are you using?
So I'm using one of my favorite knives. It's a global, it's called it's a vegetable cleaver, just because it's got the blunt nose there, but it's very comfortable and lightweight in my hand. Yeah. Oh, Web Global knives. Yeah, they're one of my favorites. They're lightweight, super comfy. Not everybody likes them, but it happens to be one of my favorites.
Does browning the apples help? Does it matter? Does it matter browning the apples?
If the apples are turning brown?
No, browning them, does that matter?
No.
Somebody who wants to get in and can't.
Called you?
Yeah.
Hello?
Almost done with this. My butter's melting. That was a great question right before class started. How much butter was it? Because I realized once you asked me that question that I'd accidentally doubled my amount of butter. So it's always a good idea to recheck. You read the recipe and double check your mise en place. Make sure you don't double up on anything accidentally. One more apple, and then we're going to start measuring and combining all of the dry ingredients first. So the next step is going to be in a larger size mixing bowl. I'm going to whisk our dry ingredients together. So when you're measuring dry ingredients, it's important to, if it's flour, I like to sort of fluff it and stir it around a little bit, because flour has a tendency to settle and get a little bit compact, which will translate, especially when you're baking. It's important to make sure that you have, for consistent results, you have the same amount of flour in your cup every time. The most consistent way, of course, when you're baking is to weigh ingredients out, but I did this recipe in cups just to make it more user-friendly in case you folks, not everybody had a scale at home. So when ingredient wise, when they're talking about brown sugar, they, even though it says it's 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar, if that means 3/4 of a cup packed brown sugar, you always want to pack it into the cup. The granulated sugar is just scooped into your measuring cup. But the flour, again, I have my 3 cups here, but when I'm measuring or scooping flour out of my flour bin, I like to fluff it a little bit, aerate it a tiny bit, so I don't get too much in here. And then taking a flat spatula or something flat or a knife, scrape it up the top. So that's 1 cup, nice and flat and even, not missing a portion, not like that or anything, okay? That's gonna help ensure you get really consistent results each time. So we need to go ahead and add our 3 cups of flour to our bowl with a whisk. Any questions up until this point? Am I going too fast?
Can we see how big the little pieces of apple are?
Yes. Is that help?
No, we're on another lady. We can't see you. Where'd you go?
Is it set to speaker view?
Oh, there you are. Okay, there you are. Can we see the pieces?
Could everyone who is not Andrea please mute themselves? Family Weinberg and Patrice, please mute yourself.
Okay, thought I was.
Okay. So while you folks are muting yourselves, I'm gonna go ahead and add the remaining dry ingredients to my flour. So I have ground cinnamon, ground ginger, baking soda. So baking soda and baking powder are ingredients that taste terrible when you accidentally get a big lump in your baked good. So if it's flowing smoothly and not clumpy, it doesn't need to be sifted. You can go ahead and pour it right in, and whisking it will homogenize it. If it looks a little clumpy at all, I would go ahead and try to break up those lumps or sift it so that you didn't have any bites, or you don't end up with bites that don't taste delicious. That was my salt. It's pink. I'm using Himalayan salt, so that's why it wasn't white in color, but any salt that you have is fine. I'm just giving it, the dry ingredients, a nice whisk like that, just to combine everything, make it homogeneous. I don't want to forget the nutmeg, so I have fresh nutmeg nuts right here and a microplane zester, and I'm just going to go ahead and add what I think is a good amount. I like nutmeg, so I go a little heavy-handed with this, but if you know it's not your favorite flavor, you can omit it or just do a little bit. Okay. That is that for the dry ingredients. Okay, I'm gonna check my butter. My butter's nicely melted. So then we're gonna move on to the liquid ingredients, but I do wanna pause. Does anybody have any questions at this point about measuring or mixing the dry ingredients or substitutions? Good, okay. So for the, we're going to call these the wet ingredients, but we're adding sugar. Sugar sometimes is considered a liquid ingredient because it melts out when it comes into contact with liquid like your butter, buttermilk, eggs. And speaking of substitutions, I wasn't able to get regular packed brown sugar to complete this recipe today. So I'm actually using a coconut brown sugar, which works really well. In lieu of the regular C&H cane sugar. Okay, so those are my 2 sugars mixed together. I'm gonna add my buttermilk right now, and then what I'm gonna do with this container is I'm gonna crack my eggs into my glass container here. That way, if I accidentally get any eggshells into my eggs, it's not going to go into my cake batter where I have a hard time fishing it out. Is that a question, someone?
Yeah, there's a question regarding the size of the apple chunks. Can you show them that?
Yes. And look, I'll show you how inconsistent mine are. I have both big and small. Here's an egg for comparison. It's okay. With this recipe, it's fine to have the bigger ones and the smaller ones.
I've been asked to ask you to slow down.
Okay.
And the substitute for was yogurt diluted with water.
Yeah, if you couldn't get the buttermilk, just so that it's not so thick, you need a little bit more of a fluid mix. But the acidity in the yogurt is going to work well in this. So I'm cracking my eggs. I know some people say that there's only one way to crack an egg. I don't believe that. I like to crack mine on the edge of something like this. I don't like cracking it flat on my countertop. So either way is fine with me, whatever technique you prefer. So checking, I don't have any eggshells in my eggs. So I'm going to go ahead and pour that into my sugar buttermilk mixture. So into the bowl, the only thing I have right now, I have both sugars, I have the buttermilk, and I have my eggs. And I'm going to go ahead and whisk that up. Okay, and then I'm going to whisk in the butter. And again, perfect spot to pause in case, make sure you let us know if you need to, need me to slow it down while you catch up or have any questions. So one question that a lot of people ask is unsalted butter or regular butter, or unsalted or salted butter. Either one is fine if that's all you can get. I know these are, challenging times. So if you can only get the salted butter, I would say just reduce the amount of salt that you put into your cake batter.
Question, what about ghee, and how about brown butter? Would that be too strong?
Oh, brown butter sounds delicious. So I would go ahead and give that a try, see if you like it. Ghee should work just fine, just as well, as long as you have the same quantity, volume. Yeah. Okay. Everybody up to this point? Anybody need me to pause for a moment? Okay. Last but not least, I'm going to add vanilla. So I'm using vanilla bean paste, which is delicious, and it has the little speckles of vanilla bean in there. I'm going to pour it into a glass measuring cup so you can see what it looks like. It's definitely thicker than vanilla extract, but it lends itself really well to baking, and it gives you more of an intense vanilla flavor. I don't know if you can see all the speckles on my measuring spoon, but super delicious. I'm using Nielsen Massey. I know there's other brands out there, but I do like their products quite a bit, their vanilla products. Okay, I'll hold this up to the light, my little glass jar up to the light, see if you can see all the speckles in there. But it makes for a very intense, super yummy vanilla flavor. So if you wanted to, you could actually decrease the amount of vanilla you wanted if you didn't want that flavor to shine through quite so much, but I like vanilla.
Do check out T. Martin's Notion vanilla bean paste is fantastic. I almost use it more than extract.
Nice, I'll have to look into that. Make sure I get it all out of the measuring spoon too. Don't want to waste any of that. Okay. So it's nice and smooth. It's whisked together. Smells delicious. And I have my dry ingredients here. I have my liquid ingredients in this bowl. And all I'm going to do is pour all of the liquid ingredients into my dry ingredients. And I'm going to use a rubber spatula. And I'm going to fold them together gently. So flour has a protein in it called gluten. So that's what makes our baked goods nice and strong. It's what makes our pizza hold together and our bread hold together. But in the instance of a cake or cookies, you don't want to overdevelop the gluten too much because you don't want it to be tough. You want it to stay nice and tender. So we're going to just mix this until it's combined. And then remembering that we're going to go ahead and mix it a little bit more when we add our crystallized ginger and our apple pieces. Okay, so stirring it together gently, scraping the sides and the bottom to make sure I get all of the flour mixed in. And if you wanted to whisk it, you could, just don't whisk too vigorously. Be gentle with your cake. All right. I just double checked my notes. I forgot to butter the cake pan, but we'll do that next. If you've already done that, good job. Okay.
Andrea?
Yeah.
Someone is requesting that you repeat order of liquid ingredients.
Okay.
I could also point them to the recipe that's in the chat.
Okay. Yeah. So the liquid ingredients include the sugar. So it's the white sugar, the brown sugar, the eggs, the buttermilk, and the vanilla. All right. I don't think I skipped anything. That was, oh, and the melted butter. So it was the melted butter, both sugars, the buttermilk, the eggs, and the vanilla. Okay, so now I have my cake batter. No giant visible lumps of flour. It's nice and smooth. I can see the baking soda already reacting with the acid in the buttermilk. So that's good. It means it's an active bottle or container. So all of these apples go into the batter. And again, I'm going to fold gently so I don't overmix my cake.
Could I use my mix master?
Yes, absolutely. Just again, you don't want to overmix once you combine the wet and dry ingredients together. You want to mix it on a really low speed. It would be great for mixing the ginger in too. Sometimes the chunks of apple affect the way it mixes, you know, because they hit the blade. So just maybe pulse it on and off a little bit, or fold those items in at the end by hand. So you can see it's cake batter with lots of apples, or lots of apples with a little bit of cake batter. One substitution that we talked about right before class started was pears. If you didn't happen to have any apples, pears would work well. They'll of course get a little bit softer in the oven, but they should work beautifully. Okay, so there's my cake batter, and I'm going to butter my bundt pan. So butter wrappers, they've already got butter on them, and they're a great thing instead of getting out a paper towel. You can use your hand if you want, or you can use the butter wrapper. And you want it, when you butter bundt pans in particular, anything that's fluted and has a lot of nooks and crannies, you really want to make sure that you get everywhere and take the time to go ahead and get all of those little spots. So this was my mom's bundt pan, and so it's not nonstick, but it's very well seasoned. If you have one and you baked cakes in it before and it's stuck and it's really frustrating because it doesn't come out pretty, what you can do is add the butter, and then go ahead and take some extra flour and shake a layer of flour in there. And then, to be extra sure, if you're not super convinced that that will work because you've had sticking experiences before, and you have a little bit of pan spray like Pam, go ahead and spray over it. So you can butter it, flour it, and then give it one more coating with a pan spray, and that guarantees almost every time that your cake will come out with no problem. But I'm just gonna keep working the butter around, making sure I get all the nooks and crannies in there. Any other questions? Everybody have a bun pan?
No,
Okay, what kind of pan are you gonna bake it in?
all right, one second, I should put my video on, I guess. I was just gonna use smaller ones in case I give to people for presents. Is that too small? I have all different loaf pans, other pans, but I thought that would be cute for like small ones. Too small?
No, that looks great.
It's okay?
Yeah,
Okay,
looks good.
okay. You wouldn't put walnuts in or anything, would you? Better without?
You could, if you had them, you could do that in place of the ginger if you liked. Yeah, that would be good.
But not chocolate chips, right?
A question regarding vinegar.
Not chocolate.
A question regarding vinegar. How much
Vinegar.
vinegar to use?
So depending on the acidity, like if you were using white vinegar, which is pretty acidic, maybe a half a teaspoon. If you're using apple cider vinegar, which is acidic but also has that nice apple-y flavor, you could use as much as a 3/4 of a teaspoon, up to a teaspoon. But the baking, that's a chemistry thing. The baking soda needs the acid to react and to start to form all the CO2 bubbles, which helps our cake rise. Okay, so the person who is substituting yogurt, that's a good substitution as well, since it already has a little bit of acidity in it. It should work just fine.
If we're buttering a pan that's not a bundt pan, do we put the flour too or just the butter?
So my bun pan, this cake comes out beautifully with just butter. It doesn't stick at all. But if you're concerned at all about any sticking, then I would go ahead, butter, flour, and then a quick coat of pan spray just to ensure that it comes out.
You wouldn't put chocolate chips in here, would you? No.
Maybe, apples, ginger, chocolate, sure.
Yeah, we'll see.
Was there another question about cake pans? Yeah, Susan, you can use 2 loaf pans. That should be fine.
I have a mini bundt pan, like a muffin size. Is it the same quantity?
Oh, is it the rack that has multiple holes in it? Little mini
No.
buns? No.
Yes. They're about that size, like a large muffin.
Like a large muffin? Okay. That one's harder to guess at, but basically you'd want to fill the cavity of the bundt pan that you're using, or any pan that you're using, about half to 3/4 of the way. And then you're going to have to adjust the baking time accordingly. So it obviously won't take quite so long to bake.
Okay, thank you.
Do you see Robin's question? What size round?
What size cake round?
I believe that's it.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you used a 9-inch cake pan, an 8 or 9-inch cake pan, you could probably split this batter into two. They'd be pretty full. You might have to do it in 3. If you have 8-inch pans, it might be 3 8-inch pans.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Would a pan that has an opening like this for clothes work?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
It's just, yeah, it's such a dense cake that the idea behind the hole is to really help the heat get through to the center of the cake and bake it evenly. so it doesn't stay doughy in the middle and then overcooked on the outside. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna start putting my cake batter into my pan, but if any more questions, just fire them at me or post them and we'll get them answered. Everyone's doing good? Yeah? All right. And I'm gonna move my cake back here because I just stuck my arm in it. Oh my goodness.
No.
I'm trying to squeeze myself into a corner.
Where would the recipe be?
Hi, what was your question?
Oh, sorry. I will,
Might be muted.
I'll mute.
Okay. Nice to see you. All right. Okay. I'll hold up my bundt pan so you can see how full it really is, but it's pretty full. It's almost 3/4. But all those apples help make this a really moist cake that will last for several days. Assuming you don't eat it that quickly, but in my household, it usually disappears in less than 48 hours. So I'm not really sure how well it ages, to be honest. We've never had one around that long. But I'm just going to smooth out the top just to facilitate even baking. But you can see that my pan is fairly full, okay? So it's about a little bit more, maybe 1.25 inches from the top of the pan. And it is ready to go into the oven. I'm gonna pop my cake, I'm gonna walk off screen for a minute. I'm gonna pop my cake into the oven. I'm using a small convection oven on the countertop. So if you're baking convection, usually, unless you have a smart convection oven that adjusts, you wanna lower the temperature of your oven by about 25 degrees, 25 to 35 degrees for convection. Otherwise, if you just have an old-fashioned kind of oven with no convection, 350 is the magic number for this cake today. All right, so it is, as you can see, a fairly dense cake. So it will take a little while to bake. So we're looking at about 45 minutes of bake time. So while it's baking, we're gonna make the glaze, but that kind of does its own thing. Pretty much it just simmers away for about 15 minutes. So we have lots of time for questions or about anything, I guess.
Andrea, if we have any dough left right now, should we put that in the oven at the same time as this, or save it until later? And then I was gonna like make a couple cupcakes or something like that with what I have left.
Yeah, so this it should hold for a couple hours at room temp. If you put it in the fridge, it's going to get too thick because of the butter. So I would recommend trying to get it all baked today if you can. Yeah, but it can wait till the next round. Yeah. Okay, and there's another question.
Alana, if you're going to freeze the cake to eat later, it obviously won't be warm when you're applying the glaze. When the cake defrosts, should you warm it in the oven before applying the glaze?
You can, although you don't want to dry it out, but just even at room temperature should be fine. You don't want to glaze the hot cake, so that's where the cooling it to warm instruction comes into play. So, and you don't also want to frost it when it's frozen or has any condensation that might form on the surface, because the moisture from the condensation will react with the sugar and the glaze, and it'll get really runny, and it'll look beautiful for a minute, and then as it sits, it'll just run off the cake. And that being said, if for any chance, I'm not sure it's going to happen, but we get one of those really super foggy days, the sugar on the cake, on the glaze, will absorb all the moisture from the fog, and it will get a little bit runnier. So if you have like a sealed cake container, that would work, or you could just double the amount of glaze and reglaze it if you need to do that. So there's the cake, and I have my pot right here for the glaze ingredients, and I have those measured out on a tray also. So heavy cream. This is brown sugar. I have my little pinch of salt right on top of my brown sugar so I can see it visually and I know that I didn't forget to measure it out. Whole cinnamon sticks. If you don't have whole cinnamon sticks, you can use a pinch of just ground cinnamon and you can adjust it to taste. So my honey's partially crystallized, so it's a little thick. But 4 tablespoons of honey is the same as a 1/4 cup, if that makes it easier for you to measure. And the brown sugar, salt. So into my pot, I put the honey, the cinnamon stick, the brown sugar with the pinch of salt on it. And now I'm gonna add my heavy cream and put it on behind me on the stove to simmer and thicken just a little bit. Okay. Now's a great time for questions because the cake is baking, the glaze is going to be simmering, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
You said 1/4 cup of honey is the same?
It's the same as, yeah, it's the same as 4 tablespoons.
Wow.
There's 16 tablespoons in a cup, so.
Susan's asking, what type of mild honey do you recommend? And is there a non-lactose substitute for heavy cream?
Oh my. I actually don't have an answer about the a cream substitution. Unfortunately, I'm sorry about that. I don't know. I haven't paid enough attention recently to know if there's a heavy cream substitute. I mean, you could try a creamer that you like that's on the market. I don't know if it reduces the same way, but you could just make caramel, kind of a more simplified caramel sauce, or, you know, honestly, you could warm up a little honey with some cinnamon in a pan and infuse the honey with cinnamon and just pour that over the cake. That would be delicious too. Yeah. I'm using a local to me honey that we got in Vacaville. I live over in Vallejo, so any mild honey, the darker the honey though, the more intensely flavored it's gonna be. So whatever you can find that's a little bit lighter in color. Orange blossom honey, of course, has very intense floral undertones. So I mean, that's one of those things. I think it's subjective. Go ahead and use whatever you either have on hand or that you really like.
Susan asks, how long to bake for 2 loaf pans?
So if you don't have the same size bundt pan that I'm using, it's really going to depend on your oven. I would start checking it at about 30 minutes or so. So to test when it's done, there's a couple ways to check. One is, of course, the spring test. We just touch the top of the cake with your fingertip, and if it's sprung back, it's done. You could use a toothpick, and if it comes out clean. There's so many chunks of apple in this that it's a little bit challenging to use the toothpick because you might just keep running into chunks of apple. And you can also use a digital instant read thermometer if you want to be really precise. The proteins in eggs and flour tend to set between 190 degrees Fahrenheit and 209. So you can, if you wanted to be super precise, you can go ahead and pull out your ThermaPen digital thermometer and take the temperature if you wanted to. I know it sounds a little funny, but I temp all my bread now because I'm tired of like a golden, beautiful loaf of challah coming out. It looks fantastic, but maybe my oven was a little bit too hot, and I go to cut into it or tear it apart, and the whole center part's doughy, or even worse, it collapses when it's cooling. So I actually just find a little spot in the braid, stick my thermometer in there, temp it to 190 to 210, and know for a fact that it's going to be done, but not overdone. So it still should be nice and moist. Yeah. What else? Hopefully I didn't rush through anything too quickly for you. What brand is the thermometer? It's a ThermaPen. I don't know if you, it's a ThermaPen MK4, if you wanted to see that. Yeah, they're pretty awesome. They came out with a ThermaPop, which is a slightly smaller round version, a little bit less expensive than these guys, but still just as accurate. And it's one of those things I give as gifts all the time. Yeah.
I just posted Chef's email address. Someone was leaving and asked for that information and left before I could. So I posted the email address, and also I don't believe there's a plan to send you links to this video, but you can go to Jewish Gateway's website and it will be posted there for you.
Great. So I am just stirring this constantly because with my rubber spatula, I can feel it. It has a tendency to want to stick to the bottom, and then it'll over caramelize or burn in that spot. So just stirring gently. Or you could turn the heat down a little bit and leave it unattended for a little bit longer.
When using the thermometer on the cake, what temperature are you wanting?
So I usually look for 190 to 210. So 210 for this cake, since it's so moist, would be just fine. It won't dry out, and it'll be set. And if you ever forget what those numbers, it's very easy to Google what temperature a baked cake is at. Oh, sorry about that.
If I want to reprint a recipe, where can I go to find it again?
Nancy?
Yeah.
It's in the chat, and you can save the whole chat, and I will post the link to it again.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the ginger, the crystallized gingers.
Uh-huh.
Can you just tell me how you use those again?
Yeah, so the kind I had, I probably did that too fast. Mine were already in little cubes.
Okay.
Do you have little?
Yeah.
Is that yeah. So I just dumped it straight in. I didn't even chop it up any further. I left it kind of big.
How many?
So it. I measured out the quantity. It was a half a cup.
Oh, okay, great, thanks.
Yeah. But if you have the round discs kind, you can just cut that into dices, small dice if you like. And of course it is optional if it's not your favorite flavor or you don't have any. Yeah.
Excuse me, did you put a whole cinnamon stick in there?
I did. Let's see if I can
Okay.
push it out.
Not break it
Okay.
up, just stick it in there.
Yep, just stuck it in
Okay.
there. It's gonna be a lot easier to pull out if it's whole.
And are we boiling this or?
Yep, you're just letting it simmer, not a hard boil, because you don't want it to
Okay.
overflow and spill on your stove. So just a gentle simmer. Yeah.
Okay. And that was honey, vanilla, salt, brown sugar, and the cinnamon stick, I think, right? I think that
Yes.
was it. Okay. Everything tastes delicious already. I've been tasting as I've been going. The batter is delicious. This glaze is delicious.
I
Mine
give you
is
the
not-
glaze by the spoonful, to be honest, when no one's looking. Yeah.
Thank you for the review, Patrice. Would anyone want to give 2 thumbs up for the batter? Please. I thought I saw it over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was eating my batter. Guilty.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Dina. Nancy, the information is in the chat along with a link.
Thank you. I'll get it.
So this glaze doesn't get quite as dark as a traditional caramel sauce, but it will darken a little bit. And then it'll still seem a little bit thin though. And once it starts to cool down, then it will thicken up enough to pour over the cake and not just puddle off. It'll set nicely on the edges of the cake.
A couple questions. What's the difference between light and brown sugar? Does it matter? And the next one is tips for freezing.
Okay, so light and dark brown sugar, the dark brown sugar has a little bit more molasses in it. So it should be fine in this cake. I find this cake seems to be really forgiving, fortunately. So it's fine to use either brown sugar, no problem. Again, I substituted a coconut brown sugar, which looks a little bit more like granulated sugar. It's not packed hard like cane sugar is. So it didn't seem to make any real noticeable difference in the cake. And then tips for freezing. So I would typically, when I freeze this, you want to let it cool completely. And you would wrap it in plastic wrap. And then I would do a layer of foil over that, because sometimes plastic wrap, when it gets cold, it loses its stickiness. So the foil is just going to help keep all that moistness in the cake while you're freezing it and help hold that plastic wrap in place. Or those beeswax wraps would be nice too if you don't like plastic wrap. Okay, anything else?
Yeah, I have a question about the freezing. This is a very large cake and there's only 2 of us. And but I want to eat the whole thing. Can you, is there a way to slice and freeze or some way?
I wouldn't do multiple small slices. I would do, maybe wedges that you think is a reasonable amount that you'd want to pull out and defrost for you to enjoy. So cut it in quarters or eighths, depending on your pan, and then wrapping those individually and freezing. So then you would just pull out the piece that you wanted to defrost at one time. And then after defrosted, then pour the glaze over it. And you can make the glaze in advance and just keep it in the freezer for several days.
Ah, okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
How long are we letting it simmer for? Is it, what consistency are we looking for?
Yeah, so I'm looking for it to get a little darker in color. And it's coating the back of my spoon, it's coating my spoon a little bit more than it did at the beginning. So it's thickening. And again, it's not going to fully thicken until you let it cool down. But one of the things about sugar is that the more you simmer it and you reduce the amount of, or the volume of liquid in there, and some of that water reduces too from the cream, the slower the bubbles pop. So if you notice that the bubbles as it's simmering are slowing down and they're getting a little bit bigger before they pop, it's a slower, it looks like a slower boil, then you know that you're at the right point, okay? But you don't have to take it that far. If you're worried about it, don't scorch it or burn it. You want to make sure you don't do that. So if you're anxious about it and you think it might be done, go ahead and pull it off the burner, let it cool down, check the consistency. You want it to be able to pour onto your cake and not just slide all the way off and fill your cake pan or your serving platter with caramel. You want to sit nicely up here. So you can test a little bit of it, and if it's too thin, just pop it back on, cook it, simmer it for a little bit longer until it thickens, and you can test it that way.
You're being asked, can you use kosher salt? And if so, different amounts?
Yeah, so kosher salt generally can be used, let's see, let me back up a tiny bit. The quantities kind of depend, of kosher salt depend on the brand you're using. So two of the big ones, Diamond Kosher versus Morton's Kosher Salt. For example, Morton's Kosher Salt is twice as salty by volume than Diamond Kosher Salt. And that's just because of the size of the crystals. So if you are, and this recipe was for a fine grained sea salt, not for kosher salt. But if you're using Diamond Kosher Salt, go ahead and substitute it just teaspoon for teaspoon. That should be fine. If you're using a finer crystal of salt like the Morton's, you probably want to reduce it by 1/2 or 3/4, so you don't end up with too salty of a cake. And again, the glaze is just a pinch of salt, so you can eyeball that. All right, so my bubbles are slowing down. They're bursting a little bit more slowly now. The colors deepen to like a really nice, rich golden brown. I'm gonna let it go a little bit further, but it's almost done at this point, okay? All right, what else you got for me?
Any concern about if there sort of is a burning happening on the sides of our pan? You know, it doesn't look like it's sticking in my glaze, but the sides of my pan, which are not as horizontal as yours, they're more vertical. I did flashing, and so some of that is sort of burnt on there.
Okay, if it's like blackened burnt, leave it where it is. If it's just like a caramel color, you can just using a silicone spatula, try to go ahead and scrape it down. But if it looks like it's burnt, one, your flame might be too high. You want to turn your flame down a little bit because it's coming up and cooking the side of your pan a little bit too much. All right. Questions? Yeah, must be pretty accomplished bakers.
Catherine, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, hi. So I have to get off. I'm going to do my glaze on next Saturday and Friday, and I know now how you're doing it, and my cake is baking very beautifully. So I'm going to get off because we have another commitment, but I just want to thank you. Thank you so much. This was really, really helpful. Thank you. And I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I don't seem to be getting that nice deep brown color.
Okay. Just be patient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could be
It's taking a long time.
I might have used, I don't know, my honey might have been light. I don't know what created the color that you have.
Yeah, sherry is not thickening much either.
Okay, just be patient.
Okay.
I had my heat on a little bit high. I'm also using, okay, so It's actually a very good point. So the pan I'm using, you can see that it's a little bit wide at the top. It's not super deep, and it's a little bit, the shape is special. So it's a saucier, and it's specifically for sauces. But having the wide pan helps with the evaporation quite a bit. So that's one reason maybe why mine went faster. If you're using a smaller pan and there's not as much surface area, it might take longer for it to get to what the texture and the color you're looking for. But just be patient.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see how thick. Okay, great.
And it's going to get thicker as it cools. Yeah. I saw somebody else has to jump off, so thank you for participating. It's hard not seeing people in person, but I hope you enjoyed the class. Okay. So now it's just a waiting game, waiting for the cake to be done, waiting for my glaze to cool. Yeah, I can see through the window of my oven, my cake is rising beautifully. It does get a little bit dark, probably because of the baking soda in there, so we'll have like a dark brown crumb on top, but that's okay.
Andrea, how long will we likely be leaving the cake in a bundt pan before we try to flip it out?
They definitely come out a little bit better when the cake is still a little bit warm. So pulling it out of the oven, letting it rest maybe 15, 20 minutes, and then turning it upside down should be sufficient. If it gets cold, something happens and you forget to flip it out, you might want to pop it back in the oven just for a quick minute to rewarm the butter, just so it releases nicely for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think another question flashed by too quickly for me to read it, so I apologize for that. Someone else have a question?
Thank you.
Hi, I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was in charge of getting ingredients for the cake, and I dutifully got everything except for heavy cream. So then I was like, well, that's okay. We have this like fancy milk that has a cream top, so we can use some of that. But now it's separating and doing a weird thing. Is there anything we can do to fix it?
Yeah. I know cream is a magical substance. I don't know. It's hard to find a substitution for that.
Yeah. Oops.
So my feeling is it would be to go ahead and like just find a caramel recipe that has butter in it. Okay. And make the caramel with the butter, and then slowly try to incorporate some of this glaze and see if you get the butter will help to emulsify it and keep it together for you. Short of that, then hold off on making the glaze till you get some cream. And you get
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. All right.
Okay, I have one. So I never buy buttermilk. I never use it. And I didn't, of course, need even though I bought a small container, I didn't use most of it. What's a good use for the buttermilk for someone who never uses one?
So you can actually use it in salad dressings, like a green goddess dressing, if you like to make creamy dressings, or blue cheese dressing for that matter. You could do something like that. You could, I make buttermilk waffles or pancakes, scones or biscuits. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
And yeah, I actually just got a text message from my cousin Molly. She's wondering, is the link still, she tried to jump on late. Is the link still active, or is it locked?
No reason to believe we're locked.
Okay.
I was able to get Miss Brenner in late.
Okay.
Lori, do
Uh-huh.
you have Molly's email address in your folder?
I have it upstairs. Do you want me to run get it?
No, it's in your email folder though, right?
Yes, you should be
Okay.
able to find it in something from steering committee.
Okay.
Can I ask a question that I guess it was in the chat and it just kept going by you? You said you could freeze the sauce. Well, how would you recommend doing that? Like in a little plastic bowl? And then how would you defrost it?
So I meant freeze the cake and then make the glaze later in the week. I've never frozen the glaze, so it could break.
I misheard. I thought you could freeze the glaze.
Yeah, but you could make it and pop it in your fridge, and it should last, 3 to 5 days, no problem, because it's been used. So, and then I used my cream today is ultra pasteurized, so that of course increases the shelf life of it. So you could try that. It should last.
And how would you warm it up at the end?
Yeah. Well, if you had a microwave, that would be useful. I don't
have a microwave.
Okay, I don't have a microwave, so I'm always trying to find a workaround. I would spoon it out into a pot and warm it really gently on the stove top. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I don't know, just sitting out at room temp. It's kind of warm in my kitchen right now, but you can see it's already thickened up considerably. And it's still quite warm to the touch, so I'm still going to wait a little bit longer. I wouldn't glaze the cake just yet. I'd let it cool a little bit more, but it does cool. It does thicken quite a bit as it sits. All right. I'm gonna walk out of the frame again, out of the picture again, and go check my cake. It's starting to smell really good, which is always an indicator that it's getting close to being done. So many ways to tell if your baked goods are done, especially if they start to smell good. That's a good key. So it's close to being done. Again, mine might bake a little faster than yours because I'm using a small countertop convection oven. So if yours isn't close to being done, it's totally fine. Don't worry. I did the spring test. And so when I pushed it down, it did spring back up, but I could hear the bubbles popping a little bit. And that is an indicator that the batter hasn't completely finished setting it. So all those proteins haven't hit their stage where they're completely baked through. So I'm going to give it another, I'm going to check it in 5 minutes because I don't want to overbake it. I'll temp it for you though, and I'll let you know what it's reading at this moment if you answer any of those questions. So, yeah, I was only temping at about 113, and the probe part of my thermometer is very sticky, so I totally underestimated how much longer it was going to need to bake. So that was good that I double checked it. So I'm thinking maybe to come up to that other 80 degrees or so, I'm going to give it another 10 minutes and then check it again. Get it closer to that 190, 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay.
I'm going to go upstairs and set
How's your kitchen so clean?
What was that?
How did you keep your kitchen so clean?
Oh, well, just for you.
Okay. See.
And just this corner. You can't see the pile of dishes in the sink right here that I just created. Yeah.
If your brown sugar is hard, not the one I used today, but I noticed that I have some that is hard. How do you soften brown sugar when it gets hard?
That's a great question. So it just needs a little bit more moisture. So of course they sell little ceramic discs that you can soak in water and pop in there. But even just a little bit of a wet paper towel in the Ziploc bag, or some people use an apple slice and put it in there in a sealed bag, and the sugar since it's hygroscopic, it's going to absorb the moisture from the apple or the paper
Oh,
towel,
okay.
and it will help
Thank you.
soften it back up.
Okay.
All right. How's everyone's glaze doing? Is it thickening up?
So you let it just cool once you've seen those big bubbles and it seems like it's thicker?
Yeah, it will definitely thicken as it cools, as it rests. It still feels pretty hot to the touch, although, I mean, I can touch it without it burning my hand. And it's thickened up considerably since I pulled it off the heat.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you taste it yet? I hope so. I hope someone tasted it. Super delicious.
It's delicious, yeah.
And again, this recipe of glaze makes a fair amount. So you could do a double glaze, let one soak in, and then do a second one. Or again, somebody else I think was making multiple cakes. It should, or one large cake. It should be enough glaze to cover everything. Yeah. All right. Anything else for me? Doesn't necessarily have to be cake related. No politics, but almost anything else.
I decided to play around after I made my 2 cakes, and I made little cupcakes, and one has chips, one has nuts, one has banana, and one has raisins. So we'll see what happens with those.
Fantastic.
Just for fun.
I'm curious about the chocolate one. Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Patrice, how long did they take to bake?
I didn't bake them yet because the other 2 cakes are in the oven.
Okay.
So when they come out, these will go in.
Very good.
Yeah. We'll see how they go.
And now it's radio silence. I'm running out of things to talk about besides the smoke and the. No, I don't want to talk about that.
Did you make up this recipe, and like how do you develop new cake recipes?
Yeah, recipe development is an interesting field. This is a oh my goodness, it's a combination of a couple of different recipes. Just playing with it a little bit here, a little bit there, playing around with the types of apples and how much to add. So I started with I had a pretty solid foundation of a nice butter cake with buttermilk in it, and then just added to it until I got what I liked. Yeah, good question though.
Jeff, there's a question about how to have more classes with you.
Sure, absolutely. Just send me an email. I do teach. My job is the resident chef at Sur La Table in Walnut Creek, and so I run the cooking school there. I teach when it's open. We teach 7 days a week, so I love teaching cooking classes, preferably in person, although this has been kind of fun. But until our kitchen's open, if anybody wants me to teach another class, just reach out. Happy to. I have to say this class has been, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna ask, can you just say one more time to make the buttermilk if you just have regular milk, or how much lemon juice do you use?
Yeah, so you can use, for lemon juice, you probably use 3/4 to a teaspoon for half a cup of milk.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say it's been great teaching this class with some tech support to help field all the questions and remind people to stay on mute. Makes it a lot easier for me. So this was super fun. And I'm hoping your kitchens all smell as delicious as mine does right now.
Really?
Hey, Andrea.
Yeah.
We are a little late to the game. We thought it started at 4, not 2. Okay. So we're just about to put the batter in the cake pan.
Okay.
How much space should we leave at the top for rising?
Yeah, so I was showing my bundt pan off. It's a fairly, I don't know how many cups it is because it was my mom's. So it's one of the larger standards. So I think it's, what do they say, 9 or 10 cups. And the cake batter filled it to about within an inch of the rim. So it doesn't rise too much. So it's not going to explode. It shouldn't explode out of your pan, but 3/4 of the way should be okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Was there anything else that you missed? I mean, any other questions?
Not right now. We're good for right now. We'll see.
Okay.
The question was contacting Chef, and I've again posted her email address in the chat.
I'm going to walk over again while you're formulating more questions and just check the cake because it smells really good and I just want to poke at it, peek at it.
Really good in my kitchen as well. Is there any batter left for me to taste, Laurie?
I'm still thinking about making cupcakes, so you can't get into it yet. That's why I was hoping Patrice had some advice to give me. I'm going to bake a batch of cupcakes right after this.
Would you come here and look at this? I want to look at those.
I do not trust this kitchen alone with you in there.
So my cake, it's getting a little dark on top, but I did temp it. It's about 140, still coming out really doughy on the tip of my thermometer. So I actually turned the temperature down a little bit so it would slow the browning on the top of my cake down while still allowing the rest of the batter to finish setting up. So don't be afraid of doing that too if it starts to
How low should we make it? Because my cake is pretty brown, but when I put the knife in, it's all batter.
So wet. Okay. So, I mean, I have a digital display, so I turned it down to 330. I don't know what kind of display you have on your oven, but 325, 340, well, that might be a little high. So 325, 330. Again, because of the quantity of baking soda in this cake, that's one reason why it's browning so quickly. It's just the chemical reaction in there. But you don't want it to over brown out either. So turning the temp down is fine.
It's cooking for 37 minutes already. So you think it's going to be more than, it has to be more than 40, more like 45, you think?
45 to 50.
Okay.
That's, yeah. And so much of that depends on your cake pan, of course. Those of you who are doing the loaf pans, it might not take that long. The cupcakes tins certainly won't take that long either. So there's a lot of factors into play with that. How accurate your oven is too will make a difference.
Would you put a piece of foil on top lightly, a piece of foil to keep it from burning, or you wouldn't do that?
So if it looked like it was going to burn, yes, but it really is just a dark brown. It's not, I'm not worried about it burning at this point. But all ovens do have hot spots and cold spots. So I definitely recommend turning your cake back to front. And if you can rotate top to bottom. If it's on, if your rack isn't all the way down at the bottom, you could put it more towards the middle, or if it's in the middle and it's getting too dark, you could lower it so it stops browning so quickly on the top and you get a little bit more heat from the bottom to finish cooking it. Yeah, but it's important to rotate it, at least back to front. Give it a little spin.
Andrea, I'm going to ask you a non-related to this recipe question.
Okay.
What is your favorite thing to teach cooking right now?
Usually like what I like to eat right now. So, I mean, that's the, end of summer tomatoes are spectacular. So, all things tomato, of course, are great. But I'm excited. I like to bake a lot. So I'm excited about, hopeful that it's going to cool down enough to enjoy baking again. So really it's, I love simple things like chocolate chip cookies. So I do a really nice brown butter chocolate chip cookie that's just super delicious and, you know, easy to make. Not a lot of dishes, not a lot of commitments. Yeah, and I'm looking forward to doing, you know, some nice bolognese sauces for pasta. Yeah, I don't know if you can see, we have some beans in our bean pot right now. My husband's cooking dinner tonight, which is so nice. So he has some black beans cooking, and he's going to pair that with some nice, he found some nice Toulouse sausages. So we're going to have beans and sausage for dinner tonight.
That sounds very good. And when you mentioned chocolate chip cookies, people move to the screen.
You know, a good chocolate chip cookie is hard to beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. I don't know. What was that?
One more
Sorry.
late question.
Okay.
Should we start the sauce while the cake is cooking, or because the instructions make it seem like we should wait till the cake is cooling before we start the sauce?
It's really up to you. So the sauce really only takes 15 minutes. So if you were going to glaze it today, then you can either do it now while you have time while it's baking, or you could do it later. You want to glaze the cake not when it's cold, but room temp, warmish is fine. But if you were going to freeze the cake for the weekend, next weekend, then you wouldn't want to make the glaze today. You would want to freeze the cake and then make the glaze right before you were going to serve it, defrost it, and then glaze it.
I have a question for Jim. Are you there, Jim?
I am.
So this is Nancy. I'm looking at the recipe you put on the chat. And I can only see it till it says one sentence passed, baked for 55 to 60 minutes. I get to dark golden B. How do I get the rest of it?
Yeah. I don't know why that happened.
Oh. Okay.
I'm going to see if I can correct that. So here's the link.
You put it in the chat?
I'm on my way.
Oh, okay.
And so this is not it. This is Chef's email. And so here's the link for everything you want to know about this cooking at Jewish Gateways.
Great.
I think there's a limit to the number of characters for any given message in the Zoom chat, so it cut off after that many characters were hit in his previous message.
Thank you, tech expert. She's actually a real expert. I'm just a wannabe.
Yeah.
And so that's been the case again and again in that posting. Thank you, Jessica.
All right, so my glaze is cooled to room temp. You can see how thick it is and smooth. So totally ready to put on the cake when the cake comes out and it's had a chance to cool down. So that is what it should look like when it's ready for you. All right, anything else? Any other questions?
Okay, so I have an update on our weird separated issue because of my mistake. It looks like it's going to be okay.
Okay.
Thickening, it's maybe going to be a little granular, but like no one's going to see it except us.
Did you whisk in a little butter, or how did you fix
No, Ezra just kept stirring and glaring at it really hard, and I think
Wills it into compliance.
that's my theory. I don't know. What did you do?
So it was, instead of just milk, we were using a cream top milk, which is like, I don't know, a weird approximation of heavy cream or milk mixed with butter. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I I think it just took a lot longer than a normal glaze, or like if we had used heavy cream, because there was more liquid to evaporate.
Yeah, well, good. And then, you know, worst case, whisking a little bit of butter in there wouldn't hurt either. I forgot to check this. This is something to note when you buy cream. A lot of times they have thickeners in them. I forgot. I was in a little bit of a rush yesterday. I just grabbed a couple containers off the shelf, and I usually don't buy cream with thickeners in it. This one actually has a gel gum in there. So my glaze probably is going to thicken a little bit different than yours. If yours, obviously, from your cream top milk, doesn't have any thickeners in it or carrageenan or anything. So if your glaze doesn't look quite like this and you have cream without carrageenan or other thickeners in there, that could be one reason why it looks different, but it's still going to be delicious. Yeah.
Yay.
Perfect. I'm glad to hear that worked out, though.
You know, you make puppy dog eyes at your spouse enough, and eventually they says it's fine. If we did want to add butter, would we do that while it's still over heat or after?
Say that again, sorry.
If we did want to add butter, would we do that while it's still over heat?
You could add it now, or you could add it when you think it looks like it might be done. Just whisk it in at the end.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
This has been really awesome. Thank you.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for joining. It's been fun.
So my timer beeped and I put the thermometer in my cake and it's about 170.
Okay. And then when you pulled the thermometer out, was it clean, or did it have some like too wet, like gooey cake batter?
It's wet.
Okay, then leave it a little longer. Yeah.
Okay. Should I move it on to a lower rack or?
If you can, and it's a little brown on top, move it on the lower racks.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Will it always be a little wet because of the apples, or will they eventually dry?
Yeah, it'll be it'll always be a little moist, but it shouldn't be that like wet cake batter like clinging to this. It should be pretty clean with moist crumbs sticking, I guess. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Now I'll pull mine out shortly and I'll show you what it looks like. It kind of did, because of my oven, even though it's small and it's convection, it has it kind of rose up a little higher in the background and did like a nice little beautiful split, and then I rotated it and the other side rose and split, so both sides are kind of doing that. But it's a bundt cake, so I'm going to turn it upside down and no one will see it, right?
Look at what Patrice is showing us. Yay, Patrice, 2 of them. Wow. Oh, look at that. Oh.
What are we looking
You're
at?
killing me. I'm starving.
I had a question just generally about baking. Often, like, I'll see a recipe and I am missing like one ingredient, but I want to still try it, or I'm like, oh, could I tweak and put like baking powder instead of baking soda? Like, how do you, and I know that like some of these things are important and some of them like you can fudge more. Do you have any resources for like how you use to substitute ingredients, or how you know like what can be easily added or taken out versus like what's essential for a given recipe?
Yeah, so essential things, I like the leavening, so your baking powder, your baking soda, your yeast, those things you got to be careful with those. You should have them, you know, in the right proportion that the recipe calls for. Off the top of my head, I can't think of a good resource, I mean, besides just Googling it, but King Arthur, their baking site has just a wealth of information. If you really want to deep dive into the science behind cooking and baking, Harold McGee, extremely well known in the industry. He's been around for, oh my goodness, quite a long time. He is all about the science behind cooking and baking. So he can explain all of that really in considerable detail. Some ingredients are easier to substitute than others for sure, or, you know, flavorings, those are easy to change out. You know, if it calls for ginger and you don't have any, you could do allspice, or, you know, or you really don't have any spices except allspice, you can use that in place of cloves, ginger, nutmeg, because it kind of tastes a little bit like all of those. The baking, or so if a recipe calls for some, for example, like today's did with the buttermilk, you can substitute regular milk with a little bit of acid added to it, like apple cider vinegar or lemon juice. You don't always get the texture of regular buttermilk because it's so thick, but it's as long as you have the acid that will react appropriately with the type of leavening that you're using.
If you take the milk and lemon juice ahead of time and just let it sit out for like 10 minutes, it'll basically, you make your own buttermilk, and then you don't need to have it separate. And it does get pretty thick.
It can get thick, yeah. Definitely if you're using good milk, if you're using ultra pasteurized milk, it doesn't tend to work as well. So sometimes you have to play with what you have a little bit. But you can also whisk in a little bit of yogurt to your milk, or a little bit of sour cream, something and boost the acid portion of that, so it reacts appropriately again with your baking soda. In this case, it's just baking soda. Baking powder. So baking soda needs a little bit of acid to start reacting. Think of those volcanoes that you do in grade school with the baking soda and vinegar, and you just get all that reaction. Baking powder often, or used to be labeled a lot as double acting baking powder. Baking powder contains baking soda as well, so it needs both heat and acid to react. So because it's got the acid in there, it'll start to react in the bowl, but it will react again a second time once it goes into the oven and starts to heat up to get your loft that you're looking for. Yeah. I hope that answered your questions. Substitutions are hard though, so honestly, finding a reliable site like King Arthur and seeing what they say about all the substitutions and making sure you're not wasting your time or your money making something that's not going to come out right due to someone who doesn't know what they're talking about.
I have a question.
Yeah.
They always say with the baking, you have to let it sit and let it cool for about a half hour. But I love hot cake. I love it when it's warm from the oven. Will it not finish cooking properly if you kind of sample it while it's still hot, or you really do have to let it? They say it doesn't finish cooking right away. You have to let it sit.
There's a little bit of carryover cooking, although with baked goods, especially cakes, you do want to cook them until they're actually set. The carryover cooking it's not always enough to completely set those proteins in your flour and your eggs. But one of the reasons a lot of times while they say with your baked goods, wait until they cool, it's because the cakes, if you try to turn them out when they're hot, they're more likely to crack and to break into pieces. So if you're just going to go ahead and cut it in the pan and enjoy it hot in the pan, go for it.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Thank you.
I had a question about flour.
Yeah.
As you mentioned King Arthur. Is that the flour you generally use for your baking products?
Honestly, my favorite flour is it's Justo's, and it's called Baker's Choice. It's an organic, unbleached flour, and Justo's is based out of South San Francisco. It's hard, honestly, it's really hard to find smaller retail bags of that. They supply the industry, so it's usually 25 or 50 pound bags. The other one that I really like is up in Santa Rosa. It happens to be another Justo. It's the brother of the family, kind of split off into their own two things. And they make flour, they mill flour that's really nice as well. But I do like King Arthur flour. If I can't find anything else, I'll get the King Arthur. But I prefer organic, unbleached. Yeah, definitely.
This reminds me of a question I've always wanted to ask. How long do you recommend keeping spice that's in a spice bottle before it starts to taste like sawdust?
Honestly, the whole spices last a lot longer than the ground ones. So if you can, buy them whole and grind them up. That's challenging with cinnamon, and ginger even, they don't lend themselves well to grinding in a nice fine powder like what you do at the grocery store. But less than a year, if you can. And it's better to buy it in smaller quantities. If you can find somewhere that does it in bulk, like Lasso Karnak or the Oaktown Spice Company, and just buy smaller quantities and replace them often, you're going to get a better flavor. Yeah. I'm gonna go check my cake again. One more poke. I think it might be done, but I'm gonna check. What did I do? Okay. So here's my cake. It definitely got brown on top, for sure. You can see when I had it, before I rotated it was just rising on one side, and then I rotated and it kind of popped up on the other side. Finished temp, 199 on that side, 197 on this side. I probably could have pulled it a few minutes earlier, but it looks great. It still feels moist. One of the other signs of your cake to look at to see if it's done is if it's pulling away from the edges. I don't think you're going to be able to see that on the video, but if it starts pulling away or coming away from the edge really easily, that's another sign that it's ready to come out. So that is our apple cake ready to cool a little bit and to get covered with that cinnamon honey caramel glaze. Oh my goodness, look how pretty that is. Beautiful.
And it came in this time without the wetness so much. So I think it was the right timing.
Yeah, good job. And it came up over the bundt pan a little bit, but it'll settle. And you can always just trim that part off for snacks and then turn it over.
Or let you in the kitchen early.
Hey, that too, yeah.
Mine just came out.
All right.
Look how pretty that is. Good job.
Very nice.
Yeah, it came out, it took 55 minutes.
55, yep. Perfect.
So we let it sit for about 20 minutes before we try to turn it.
Yeah, and then to be honest, because I've had my, quite a few, or my fair share of bundt cakes that don't come out of the pan, I'll take a butter knife or a smaller spatula like this, and just kind of go around a little bit and just see if I can push the cake out from the side and the center as well. And that way, if you can see it moving, it's more likely that it will flip out really cleanly and nicely when it's cool enough. Yeah, but again, you want to unmold it when it's still a little bit warm. If you let it cool all the way in the cake pan, it might stick when you go to unmold it.
I shouldn't go around the edge until it's cooled some, right?
Exactly. Like I'm doing it a little too soon. Yeah, don't do it yet, but
okay.
I give it a little nudge to see if I can move it, and it's really.
Mine didn't pull away from the sides.
Okay, good. I probably overbaked mine because I was talking.
So, you know what? I think it's my thermometer because I just put it in and it's pretty clean coming out.
Okay.
It's going out of the oven.
It's probably ready. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
T. Martin had a question for you. Are there any baking books you like?
It's an oldie but goodie, and again, it explains why things work a lot. So if you ever did something and you weren't sure why it happened, But the Cake Bible is a really good one. Again, that one's mostly cakes, but she does have other ones. I think she has the Pie and Pastry Bible and quite a few other cakes, but I really like how she includes the science behind why it works, and if it fails or there's a mistake or something happened and you want to know why, you can look it up. I do really like that. Goodness. Well, when I was at Chez Panisse, I worked with David Leibovitz. He's moved to Paris and has started his own life and his blog there. I don't know if any of you folks follow him, but I do really like his books as well. I think he has really solid and very well tested recipes. So I tend to like his books a lot, like just in terms of reference books. Those are usually my two main ones. And then of course there's all kinds of new ones that I like to look at because they have the beautiful pictures and inspiring photos. Yeah.
Could you put those in the chat?
The books, the authors that I like? Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thanks.
Jim might have to help me with that, or I might have to do it after because I'm using my phone as a camera.
Would you, between Laurie and I, maybe we can get that down. What is the name again?
So the person who wrote the Cake Bible and the other ones, her name is Rose Levy, I think Birnbaum or Birnbaum, but she's been she's been around for at least 30 some odd years, so she's pretty easy to find. And then it's David Leibovitz. I have to look up the spelling of his last name. Oh, there you go. Someone found it. Yeah. Is that you, Jim?
That is, and I'll go look for David in more detail.
Okay. Yeah, so he has like some great ice cream books out. He has a book of just chocolate recipes out. They're a little bit older. Some of them might be out of print now, but those are both really good. Of course, for a local chocolate person, Ellis Medrick is fantastic. Her recipes are delicious. For those of you old enough to remember, she used to have the Bakery Coco-Lot in Berkeley. But she's still writing cookbooks, actually.
David Leibovitz's website.
Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody dive into their cake yet, or are you all being patient and waiting?
I'm not being patient.
Well, how are we going to glaze this? If we take it out, it's just going to run, it's not going to really sit on, we have put it on a plate and then just drip it on, and then whatever drips, drips.
Yeah, I mean, so turn it out after it's been out of the oven for about 15 minutes, and then let the cake cool a little bit longer. So you want to glaze the cake when it's warm, not hot, or room temperature. And then you just pour it over when your glaze has had a chance to thicken up. So again, it's still thickening, even as it's sitting and cooling. And then if your cake's a little bit warm, the cold, even if your glaze is a little bit cold, it will run down. I have the center of my bundt. There's about this much glaze in the middle, which is not a bad thing. If you have too much glaze and you don't want it to run onto this part where you don't see it visually, just do a little bit till it's decorative and then fill the center with the rest of the glaze. And that way it's a little bit more presentation worthy.
You wouldn't put the glaze in the refrigerator a little bit to cool it off. It has to naturally cool off by itself.
You could, you don't let it get too cold, because then you'll struggle. Then it'll be too hard and you'll be struggling with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but if you watch it, it should be fine. Yeah.
One of your bakers delivered a taste to me as a reward for my hard work.
Oh, and how was it?
Out of this world. I would welcome any deliveries.
Well, what kind of apples did you use? Or did you use the pears, Lori?
I used Braeburn and Granny Smith apples.
Nice.
Didn't use the pears. They'll be for the one he makes me make tomorrow.
There you go. Oh, good. All right, well, any last questions? I know we have a few more minutes, but anybody else have anything?
Oh, yeah, maybe just quickly go over how I take this out of my pan. You said a knife around the sides and.
Yeah, so, you know, the bun pans have these, you know, indentations and a lot of things. So you can't, like a regular cake pan, you can't just run all the way around it. But what I do, I'm just trying to clear myself a little spot. Is I'll just take, you know, a smaller or a butter knife, and I can see actually that my cake, because I probably should have pulled it a minute or two or sooner. But if I just push on it a little bit, I can see it's pulling away from the edge of the pan with no problem. So I go around each of the little scalloped areas on my buns and just push the cake, just nudge it away from the edges. And then even in the center, sometimes just a little bit right around the neck of the buns, it will stick. And just, again, just sort of releasing it a tiny bit, pushing on it. And then the real reveal is when you turn it over, hopefully it has been buttered or buttered and floured enough so it doesn't stick at all. But I'll go grab a platter and I'll pop this one out, even though it's a little bit soon. I'll do it, okay?
Okay.
Give me just a sec.
The real reveal, she said. Drum roll or something.
Oh. All right, so you just invert your plate or your platter. It's a little hot, so I'm going to take my towel so I can pick it up. This is why it's nice to let it cool just a little bit so you don't burn your hand. So I'm just kind of grabbing it from the center, put my plate over it, turn it upside down, and I actually felt it release. I felt it drop onto the cake pan, or to the, felt it drop out of the cake pan onto my plate. So let's see if it's stuck anywhere. Oh,
wow.
Came out perfect.
Whoa.
Oh, look, one apple. There's one little apple bit in there, but that's okay.
Very clever look out there. Darn.
Just
have to. And you can't even tell it cracked on the top.
Lovely.
Yeah. All right. Yay. Yeah, I didn't want it to fail in front of anybody.
So you have the one behind you there too. So worst case, you could have just been like, and this is the cautionary tale.
Exactly. Well, we were debating, my kids and I were debating before class if you guys would actually notice if we cut into it first before class started. So we resisted. So now we have two. Yeah, one to freeze for next week and one to enjoy now.
Wow.
But, yeah. All right. So just in terms of care of your pans, again, this one was my mom's. I think it's aluminum. It's not nonstick at all. But I treat this a little bit more like cast iron in the sense I don't clean it with really aggressive or harsh detergents. I let it soak with water to loosen all the cake bits, and then I'll wipe it out with a really mild detergents, and it keeps it almost nonstick. So so take good care of your bun pans, and they should last for a while.
Thank you, Chef. Any last questions for the chef? And if you think of one later, you have the email address.
I have a question since I'm late to this game. For the caramel, what kind of consistency in the pan should we be going for? Like, I assume it's going to get more thick once I take it off the heat.
Exactly. So it'll thicken and darken a little bit as you're cooking it. the bubbles, as the water and the cream evaporates, the bubbles will start popping a little bit slower. They'll get a little bit bigger and they'll start popping a little bit slower. And that will give you, that's a good indication that you're getting to that point. It doesn't get super dark. We're not making a traditional caramel sauce where we're caramelizing the sugar first. This was fairly thin. It coated my spatula before I pulled it off the heat. And like just a thin, even coating. It didn't just run off immediately. It kind of slowly poured off. And then this is what it's finished looks like, and it's completely room temperature right now. So
okay, so I can let this cool, and then just it won't like completely harden by the time.
No.
Okay, cool.
It won't get, because it doesn't have any butter in it. It won't get completely rock hard. And then also, I had mentioned that if you let it cool and it really didn't seem thick enough, you could put it back on the heat and cook it a little bit longer, wait till it cooks and those bubbles start to pop a little slower, get a little bit bigger, and recook it.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else that you might have missed a little bit, do you think?
I think we're pretty well caught up other than that. It looks like it's coating the spoon, so I think we did it right.
All right.
Well, thank you very much. This was excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great, and
Well,
great fun. You kept it really fun too.
Well, good. I had a lot of fun, and thank you so much, Jim and Lori, for putting this together and being my tech support.
It was terrific.
Not a Zoom expert by any stretch of the imagination, but this was super fun. And don't hesitate to reach out via email if you had any other questions for me. I'm happy to answer them.
This was great fun.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Again, yeah, Andrea.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you.
so much. This was great.
Yeah.
Oh, good. I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care, everybody. Happy holiday.
Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Diana, give me-
Thank you. I'm still here. Bye. Thank you.
I'll say it in front of everybody. You were so much fun. It was like hanging out with a friend, except my friends aren't technically as savvy. Your conversation was a delight, and thank you. It was a delight to spend the afternoon with you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That's nice to hear. I had a lot of fun. You guys are great. Hopefully we could do something like this again.
Me too.
And we've got thumbs all over the place. All right.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, thanks, guys.
Say goodbye, Jim.
Bye. Thanks
Bye,
again, you
everybody.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.
So how do I save this? Hey, don't leave. Oh. Dave, how do I save this video recording?
You're mute, Dave.
That's a question Jess would know the answer to. I assume that probably everybody has to leave in order for the recording to be available, but I don't know. Like, Jess is in the backyard working on a project, so I'm not able to ask her.
I'm going to, if permitted, I'm going to empty the room. The chef is gone. And let's see. Oh, they did it on their own. Now I'm going to remove Laurie.
Bye.
And then, bravo, Dave, for catching up.
Well, it was, luckily the recipe was very well written, so we were able to just read the instructions and figure out how to do it pretty quickly.
I'm going to say goodbye to you, and I think we'll be seeing you a little later.
Yep. All right. Have a good one. See ya.